following scripture quotations are taken from the Holy Bible, New Living Translation, with copyright by Tyndale House Foundation, used by permission of Tyndale House Publishers, all rights reserved. Hi, I'm Peachy Pie, though that's not my real name. Welcome to my channel, and this is a mini applause for you. Why do you get a mini applause? Because you're amazing. And you're amazing because you made it through to today. No matter what you're going through, you made it through to today. And since you made it through yesterday to get to today, and I have faith that you're going to make it through till tomorrow, why don't you hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell so you can be here when I post another video. Thank you for joining me today. We are going to be talking about a topic that I was really enjoying researching. From Victim to Victor, Abused Men Are Not Forgotten is the title, right? So we're looking at the lesser known victims of domestic abuse, men. Although they are not often discussed, their situations can be just as abusive as the female counterparts. First, we're going to look at what domestic abuse can look like for men, and then we'll take a look at some stories of abuse victims who are males. Trigger warning, this video contains depictions of physical, emotional, and other abuse against men. So if those things are a problem for you, you're welcome to pop off this video at any time. And thank you for joining me, and there are other videos on my channel, and you have the entirety of YouTube to retreat to. Let's get into it. But before we get started, I just want to say thank you to the developers of Paint by Number for allowing me to play the game. The game has beautiful pictures and I find it really relaxing, and it's available for free from the Google Play Store or from Aptoid if you have a Huawei device. Okay, what domestic abuse looks like for men. According to an article by ICAEW, though male victims of abuse are harder to spot because they are less likely to come forward and they are more likely to consider ending their own lives. Their reticence may be due to shame and fear of humiliation. Similarly to women, male victims of domestic violence may exhibit the following signs of abuse: frequently reporting their whereabouts to their partner or being harassed by calls from their partner. They may have low self-esteem, even if they were confident before, and may no longer take care of their appearance. They may often miss work or events or show a drastic change in personality, for example, from being confident to being withdrawn, right? They may shy away from social media and may have limited access to money and assets. They may suffer from insomnia, lack of productivity at work, and wear clothes that are inappropriate for the weather in order to hide cuts or bruises. From an online article titled, "I'm a Man and Experiencing Domestic Violence," the most common forms of abuse directed at men include physical violence, emotional and psychological abuse, and an unequal power dynamic when it comes to decision making in the relationship. Dominating/controlling behaviors like belittling or insults, and social isolation. So really what we're seeing is that abuse looks the same for people of all genders. And let's take a look at a few stories of male domestic violence or domestic abuse victors. I call them victors because, yeah, they are victorious now. Anyway, due to copyright infringement and fair use issues, the following stories have been paraphrased. Right? Mark was a protective serviceman. He worked protecting high-profile clients. He never believed that he himself might need protection. He met Sarah through a friend years prior and eventually decided to date her. He claims that he noticed a few warning signs early on, but he decided to ignore them because she was beautiful and funny and dangerous. It was only weeks later into their relationships that Mark had discovered Sarah was actually married and had separated from her husband, and that her son was living with her family due to her problems with drugs and alcohol. Mark said he also uncovered an event which he called something horrific from Sarah's childhood, which he wouldn't make public. Mark says that because of this event, he felt the need to become Sarah's protector. Though he wasn't aware of it at the time, Mark now realizes that Sarah was manipulating him into isolation. Twice Sarah persuaded Mark to relocate away from a place where he was comfortable, and though he would be the one to pay for the rent and other expenses, he wasn't allowed to have his name next to hers on the lease. The first time he moved with her, he wasn't even allowed to take many of his things. Sarah told him that there would be no space in the new apartment. Sarah had already become violent by them, but a pattern of abuse had emerged when she started drinking. She would cycle through happiness and then overt sexuality, then her mood would dip and she would become violent. Within days of moving the first time, Sarah punched him so hard that she broke her hand. but because he wasn't on the lease and police policy declared that they be separated, Mark was arrested. Though the constable later apologized for his treatment, Mark began the cycle of making excuses for Sarah's behavior. He claimed hoping that one day she would realize that he was not her enemy. Soon, Sarah decided that they needed to move house again, and though her parents warned him against it, Mark felt that he needed to be there for her because he was probably the only one who would support her. Later, Sarah fell pregnant, and though Mark was initially uncertain that the baby was his, he stood by and supported her. And although there was a period of peace during her pregnancy, at the time of the birth, Sarah alarmingly refused to put his name on their daughter's birth certificate and gave the child her maiden name. Months later, the physical abuse returned. This time though, says Mark, things were hugely different. I was attacked whilst I was holding our daughter, who at the time was choking. As I was trying to clear her airway, I was punched hard in the face. I instinctively covered our daughter with my body as the blows rained down. I was screaming at her to stop, which she eventually did, but she continued to scream abuse at me. Her reason? The way I had asked her to hand over our daughter so I could administer first aid. Little did I know that this was the turning point. The shock of being attacked again whilst holding our baby tipped me over the edge, and I had a breakdown. I collapsed at work and ended up telling my occupational health department everything. Because the child was involved in the situation, social services were required to be involved. Mark says that it was the first time that he had ever received positive help. He claims that the police had always treated him like the perpetrator. He also recalls being afraid of what his partner would do if she found out that he had told someone about her behavior, and being concerned that their child would be taken away. Social services eventually interviewed Sarah. Surprisingly, she confessed to the attack but insisted that she had been provoked. Mark was then informed by the interviewer that of the two types of abuser, Sarah was the one who had no remorse and blamed the victim for her abusive behaviors. Though Mark did eventually leave Sarah, he says that things actually became worse. One day Sarah offered to reconcile and Mark was too tempted to pass up the opportunity. He says that when she arrived, he recognized the patterns of her abuse, and when he felt she was going to escalate, he told her to leave. Once he asked her to leave, she became violent with him. Though he phoned the police, they didn't arrive soon enough, and Sarah hung up the phone and began beating him with it, threatening to take their daughter with her. Mark admits that he grabbed Sarah's wrists in order to pull her away from the baby with the most minimal amount of force that he could, because he was concerned that she would harm the baby, as she was drunk at the time. He grabbed the phone and called the police again, running outside and locking Sarah inside with the child so she wouldn't take her and leave. When the police arrived, because Mark admitted to grabbing Sarah by the wrists and pulling her, though they were both arrested and their baby taken with him to the police station, Mark was the only one charged with assault, and Sarah was free to take their baby and leave. Mark says that at this time he was driven to consider suicide, as he, the victim, was being treated as the perpetrator and his abuser was allowed to go free. It would be 5 months before Mark's case was dropped and he was released. Shortly after, Mark left Wales and moved as far away as he could get. He admits that he was heartbroken, considering that he wasn't sure he would ever see his daughter again. Despite the oversight on the part of police, Mark never laid a formal complaint. He says that though victim and perpetrator stereotypes had kept him being punished for being a victim, he agrees that he was guilty of this thought pattern about abuse for some time as well. While he had been a policeman and later security services personnel, it had never once occurred to him that the victim could be male. Though Sarah and Mark are no longer together, Mark has a better relationship with Sarah now. He says that she is actively receiving help and support from her family to become a better parent and is doing a good job of parenting their daughter. Mark admits that his experience has opened his eyes to the reality that both men and women can face domestic abuse, and now actively speaks out about his experience in order to help other victims and educate police services. David's story comes from Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria. Being previously a divorced man with children, David felt he should have seen the signs. He confessed that his partner started blaming him for everything in their relationship, and within a year of his marriage, he was in a living nightmare. His partner beat him, but not in the face. Eventually, David started to feel like he deserved the beatings because she had convinced him that he was a bad husband. The abuse escalated to rape. David says his partner forced him to have sex to become a better husband for her, though he mentions that he was not aware that he was being raped at the time. While David wanted to leave, He thought that leaving meant leaving his children behind, and when he reached out to his mother for help, she simply asked him what he had done to deserve his partner's treatment of him. Eventually, his wife decided to leave him, and though everyone blamed him for the end of their relationship, it took him years to finally confess what happened to a counselor he was seeing after he lost his job and fell into depression. He says that caring for his children helped him to cope, but doubting his capabilities as a husband has left him struggling. He is hesitant to start dating again. He believes his wife may have had extramarital affairs and become bored of him, which was how he was able to escape the abusive relationship. Even though she took almost everything from the house in the ensuing divorce, David confesses that he was just happy that the abuse was at an end. He also confesses that if it wasn't for his kids, he may have attempted to take his own life. It was in counseling that David finally realized that he was in an abusive relationship. He also finally discovered that what had taken place in their marital bedroom was actually rape, and says that his counselor was instrumental in his healing process. David admits that it's not easy for someone to leave an abusive relationship because there are many things to consider, like the children, money, lawyers, and other things. Cyrus's story also comes from Domestic Violence Resource Centre Victoria. Though he initially describes his relationship as blissful, Cyrus agrees that it soon became abusive. His partner exhibited controlling behaviors. She had issues with him going out to meet friends or wearing certain types of clothing she didn't approve of. He also says that she would regularly insult him, and though she would never admit to being wrong, she has been physically violent with him at least twice in the past. Despite the abuse, they decided to get engaged. Cyrus admits that he had the grin and bear it type of attitude when it came to his relationship. After a while, he started paying attention to her lack of love towards him. He then put his foot down and they eventually broke up. After the breakup, he dealt with the emotional trauma, desperately trying to convince himself that he wasn't the one who was in the wrong. He admits his self-confidence had taken a dive, but is still on the mend. Cyrus says that his first step was to financially disengage himself from his fiancée and her family. Then, he started to go back to doing the things he previously enjoyed. He says that his faith and religious counseling were instrumental to helping him become healthy again, and encourages victims to do whatever they can to leave abusive relationships because the abusive partner is unlikely to change. The last story we have is of a man named Alex Skeel. His story is iconic because when his partner was jailed in 2018, she was the first woman in the UK to be convicted of coercive and controlling behavior. There is a documentary about Alex called Abused by My Girlfriend. Police at the time called Alex's case one of the most extreme cases of domestic violence ever dealt with. Doctors told him that at the time of his girlfriend's arrest, he was only days away from death. Though they had met at college when they were both 16, Alex's family said they watched helplessly as he retreated, though they were completely unaware of how horrific the situation really was. In the public eye, Jordan Worth was an exemplary figure. She came from a loving and supportive family, was a gymnast and coach, an excellent student, eventually achieving her honors degree in fine arts, and she wanted to be a teacher. She had several philanthropic pursuits as well, raising money for children in Africa and doing voluntary work for unwanted animals. But at home, Jordan controlled every aspect of Alex's life. At one point, neighbors heard Alex shout for her to get off of him because she was hurting him. On several different occasions, he was seen limping, with black eyes and with his arm in a sling. After one incident of early morning shouting, Alex's neighbors called the police. This is a direct quote from the article on the extent of his injuries. The ambulance crew noted injuries to his hand, burns to his arms and legs, which were being self-treated with cling film. There was cling film around his ankles and a hand wound that was bleeding. He was taken to Bedford Hospital's acute clinical unit and then taken to Addenbrooke's Hospital. The prosecutor said he had second and third degree burns which will leave permanent scarring. Jordan pled guilty to grievous bodily harm with intent and coercive controlling behavior and was subsequently sentenced to 7.5 years of imprisonment. Alex believes that he survived to help other males in situations of domestic violence. He hopes that bringing awareness to the plight of men in domestically violent relationships will encourage them to get help. He says creating awareness for male victims of domestic abuse is what keeps him going. So what have we learned? We've learned that domestic abuse is a genderless crime. Anyone can be an abuser and anyone can be abused. We have to protect each other and as a society, stand up for those most vulnerable without prejudice. Gender roles can interfere with people coming forward or getting the help they need. Abuse is a societal problem, not just a personal relationship problem. Anyway, that leads us to our scripture of the day, which is from Psalms 116 verse 2 and says, "Because he bends down to listen, I will pray as long as I have breath." So that's great. Thanks God for listening to us while we are going through struggles. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me. I hope that you are having a good day. We're coming to the end of 16 days of activism really soon. And I really hope that there will be change in society. I'm fighting for change as far as I can. And I'm hoping that we will see an end to domestic violence situations in, everyone's homes and more awareness in everyone's homes as well. So thank you very much for being here, and I hope that you have a phenomenal day further. Bye.